I'm recording. All right, so test. The test will be on arrays. What have we done with arrays? We often work with parallel arrays that will be we've done like have a bunch of products. I often have like fill in a drop-down list and view things. And other things you can do is like have some kind of cart and add things to the cart from the array, or some kind of search, find all the things with this property. So we've seen some examples of that. And the other topic for the test is going to be elements on the page that have like array-like features. And so that is radio buttons and checkboxes that work in a group. Although like in the 5 guys from yesterday's lab, there was one that the fries checkbox is like a lone checkbox sort of by itself, but all the toppings are work as a group. So those are the topics for the test, and the test being that it's going to be in a lab period with 2 parts and on a Tuesday, and I don't want to do it the Tuesday before Thanksgiving because lots of people tend to extend the holiday. The holiday is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but a lot of people extend it. So we're going to put it on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And so that's when it is, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. It will be the test. There will be a lab. So I'm acknowledging that many people might not be here, but I will be here and I will give a lab. I can be persuaded to have a Zoom session during there. So if you're doing it from home and have questions during that time, you can ask me questions. Those of you who ask me questions, but you'll probably have to request because I'll forget. But so there will be a lab on the 22nd. It will, I'm not giving you the day off, but so long as you do the work, I don't care if you're here or not. I can be persuaded, if reminded, to set up a Zoom session. So if you're working at that time, I will be here. It will be a time you can ask me questions. Then the 29th will be the test. Again, arrays and radio buttons, and can also be checkboxes. It became clear yesterday, more than one person said to get the checkboxes for the toppings to work as a group, they should be given a name. So I gave there were 2 in 5 guys. There were 2 sets of radio buttons, which I gave names, but I gave them the same name. So you had to realize they should have separate names. The what kind, you want a hamburger or a cheeseburger, and you want it rare or well done. Those had to be 2 separate groups, so they had to have different names. Also, you have to have values that are useful. And if you're going to be working with arrays, the most useful thing is to have the value be the index of an array. Some of those, they didn't need to be arrays. The toppings, the values could just as well be ketchup, mustard, lettuce. But when you want multiple properties, like then it's a hamburger and then it costs $3.79. And when you want multiple pieces of information from a single radio button, then it's useful to work with arrays, and then it's useful to have the value to be the index. That's not what I started to blather on about. What did I start to blather? So people, there's lots of work on that part of the test. There will be lots of HTML work. We tend to do, there tends to be a couple of points on HTML, and then we jump into JavaScript. That's where the bulk of the points are. There are lots of points in the radio buttons and in the checkboxes, because if you don't get the HTML right, the JavaScript has no chance of working. You need to understand about names, how names are used to group things, how we use in JavaScript document get elements with an S by name. So name is a grouping thing. And here's where some people, when we started off with radio buttons and we used the name to group them, and the nature of a radio button is that you can only make one choice. So people thought that giving the checkboxes a name meant that you could only choose one. That is not correct. The name groups them, says that all of these toppings are alike and can be treated as a group, as an array. But the very nature that the type was checkbox means that you can check more than one. And if the type is a radio button, you can choose at most one. So it's the type that controls how many you can choose. The name is just a way to group them. And okay, so that's what's on the test coming up. So 29th is that test. We have started to move out of into new material. We started to look at fetch. And so yesterday you were also fetching. And then typically with me, what you get when you fetch and then parse some data, some text, you usually end up with arrays. And then our next topic will be, instead of making parallel arrays, we will make arrays of objects. So we have to learn what an object is. So on the test on the 29th, I will give you somewhere some, if I decide to not hand you the arrays, but make you parse. So parsing can be on the test. That's a legitimate topic for the test. Parse something, use split to make an array. Maybe use split twice to make parallel arrays. That is a possible topic for the test. But to read the file, to fetch the file, that's not. That's new stuff that's not on the test. I may give you the data to be parsed, to be used. I may give it to you in a file. And if you choose to fetch it, that would be allowed, but not required, and there will be no points for it. So if it's hard, if it's something you're going to stumble over, don't do it. If you got reading a file and you think it's easier and more natural, then I won't prevent you from doing it. All right, what else? So again, so we know when the test is, it's after the break. We know when the break is, it's the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. We know that there's a lab on Tuesday. Okay, what else is there? I also, big reminder day, this is the week for freshmen to register for classes. So you should have met with an advisor, gotten a pin, know what you're taking. Things can close, the things you want to take can close. So as soon as it's the time when you can register, you register. You don't dawdle or you get locked out of stuff. Okay, what else? And on Thursday evening, there is an information technology leadership event in the lobby. So wear something other than a hoodie and get some for your hors d'oeuvres and network and meet upperclassmen, alumni. So if you want to do that, you are welcome. The lobby, the atrium. I don't know, like 6 to 8 or something. Thursday. Tomorrow. Yes. And I did send an announcement, I believe, but anyway, I said like 2 events. That was one of them. The other one's gone by. So the only thing is that you should business casual or something. So you should, if you're going to go, don't wear t-shirts or hoodies or something like that. But otherwise, go and have some food and meet some people. Give a future and see what's coming up. All right. So now what are we doing today? Okay, so should we carry on with the matrix quiz, or are you bored with it and you want to start objects? Objects? She says objects. Okay. All right. So now I need something to make. What kind of objects do you want to make? We need some data. So we could do anything where we have some parallel arrays, we could now do as objects. So it could be horror movies, it could be Pennsylvania cities, it could be, we could go back to the matrix quiz and start it as objects. Any preference about what you want to use to make objects? Care about anything. All right. Then let's go with the matrix then, and then we'll just start turning it into objects. So I have, you have it, or I have it up here. Here is this fetch. So I'll go with the fetch version. I have it. If you don't have it, download the zip, uncompress the zip and move it to wherever you want it to, and then put this HTML in that folder. I already have that. But I'm going to open code and open up my Explorer. Here is a fetch 2b. Okay. That is the version that we have. But I'm going to sort of start again. So I'm going to do a file save as. What am I doing? File save as and version C. And I'll say objects. What an obnoxiously long name. Okay. So we're going to, instead of having questions and answers and choices, instead of having a parallel array, we're going to have an object where it has a question object has a question property or a statement of the question property and an answer property and a choices property. Okay. So what are we gonna have? What are we gonna have? So here's my next question. We are going to have a class, and objects are, so you say, I'm going to have a multiple choice question, and then you make a particular multiple choice question. Who plays the character Morpheus? That's and its answer and its choices. That's a particular question. That's an object. And then there is this thing called a class, which is the more generic thing, which says it's a multiple choice question and there's a statement of the question and there's an answer. Okay. So we need to make a class before we make an object. And do you want the class in the same file, or do you want me to sort of isolate that into a separate file? Same file. Okay. We can do that. It's kind of like 50-50. In your longer run of programming, you will separate them. But for now, as we're learning, it's convenient to have one place to look for everything. So, I mean, I could go either way. You said same, so let's go with same. And so we're going to say that we're going to make a class. And then we need a name for our class. Choice or question or just our standard thing. We need a name. We're going to get rid of those. That's what we're replacing. So I could call it question. I'm going to have something. These are going to be the properties. What are now my arrays are going to be the properties. So I'm going to have the question, the answer, the choices. And then what's the bigger thing? Quiz. Okay. I'll go with that. I'm going to make it capitalized. So we're going to say we have a quiz. Okay. Then I'm going to say what I need to make a quiz. What is we call it the constructor. So I'm going to make a constructor. What are the ingredients I need to make a quiz question? Where am I at? I went into cap locks instead of tab. There we go. So a constructor is like a function. It's like the function that makes your question. And then there are like two approaches. Well, there are multiple approaches, but I can say I'm going to make like almost like an empty shell, and then I'm going to add stuff, or I can say, here are the things I need to make. Here are the properties I need when I make a question, and I'm going to have all those things right away. So do you want like the trivial approach and then piece it together, or do you want to sort of just make the question sort of straight out? Make the question straight out. Okay. So this means that I'm going to, what do I need I have to send my constructor information for it to make, if you say do the trivial one, I don't need any information. I just sort of say, I want an object, and then we dress it up later. But if you say, I want to make it straight out, then you say, okay, here's the information I need up front to make this object. I need a question. I need an answer. I need choices. So I'll keep it simple. If I say question, I'll misspell it. So I'll just say quest. And ands. And we'll say choices. Now choices is going to be a string of choices, and then we'll deal with splitting it up. Okay. So this is the stuff I am sending you, and then I'm going to say, okay, my question is what they sent me, quests, and my answer is what they sent me, ands, and my choices are what they sent me, choices. And I'm using the word my, but that's not what we use. We use the word this. So I'm going to say this, I'm going to make a quiz. The quiz is my class. I'm going to make a particular, what we call instance. I'm going to make an instance of my quiz question. And that's an object, and it's going to have properties. Now, these things that come in here in the parentheses are just what you're naming the information when it comes in. And that does not have to be the same name as the thing that comes in, but it can be. So I can call my property Q, I could call it quest, I could call it question, so it can have the same name, it can have a different name. These are just sort of local temporary names. And then this, what I put here, is what I'm going to be using after I make the thing. Some people like them to be the same. Some people like them to be different. I'm going to be open to what you want. Do you want them to be the same or different? Different. He wants them to be different. So So this is the question one. How do you want to say quest? Do you want to say question out? Do you want to make it a capital Q? What do you want?
Okay.
All caps. Don't go all caps because all caps is usually reserved for when we want something to be constant. That might be okay because we're not going to change the question. I'll say okay. What's that? I don't even know what that means. I don't know Spanish. I know the teeniest bit of French, which I've forgotten. All right. Well, that's what I did. I didn't capitalize it all. I could. So I'm going to say this question is quest. I'll say this answer is ands. This choices is choices. Again, they could be the same. They can be different. It doesn't matter. What you send here is just very briefly exists for the purpose of making it, and then it's gone. And these are the things that we really use once we get going.
Wait, we can't use quest?
These could be the same. I could say quests here. I could say this quest equals quest. I could give them the same names. This is just a temporary, as I'm using the constructor to identify the data, to identify the order of the data. The first thing I'm going to call, when it comes in, the first thing I'm going to call quests. The second thing I'm going to call ands. The third thing I'm going to call choices. Then I assign those values to the properties of my object. And then those are the names of the properties of my object. So I could give the temporary names and the more long-lasting names I could call them the same thing, but I don't have to. Okay. So let's write some stuff. People often say that a class is a template. A generic thing from which you make specific things. That's very vague. So what I mean is this is a question. This is a multiple choice question or a quiz. We called it quiz. And then when we make one, it'll be a specific. We will make the question, who plays Morpheus? And here's its answer, and here's its choices. So we have a generic template, and then we have this specific thing. So the class is the generic thing, then you make an object, and it will be a specific thing. When you make a specific thing, that is an object. Start with the generic, and then we make the specific from it. It's the constructor makes the object from the class template. That's the job of the constructor, is to sort of make the object in the first place. But when you make an object, that's when you use the constructor. Once it's made, you can do other things to it, but it is when you first get the information and you first make the object, that's when you use the constructor. And then what do I want to say? Other things we've been saying here. Quests and choices are temporary names for the info coming in. And what we want to specifically mention is that the order matters. So a function in general that has information, and the constructor is just an example of a function. If you're sending information in, then the order matters. And then once we've constructed the object, when we've made the object, then I'll say here, from now on, when we want the statement of the question, this is too long. When we want the statement of the question, we use dot question and not quest. So quest was the temporary thing that comes and goes and it's gone, poof. And question is the thing that remains for the life of the object. So when we make an object, a quiz object, then, and we want to get the question statement from the quiz, we will say dot, and the dot is important. And you've been seeing dots all along. Dot value, dot inner HTML. We've been doing objects all along. You didn't know it, but all those elements, when we're in JavaScript and we're referring to things on the page, those have been objects and properties of objects. So when we sort of grabbed a select, when we said my select equals document.getElements by ID cell grade, we were grabbing an object. When we said document get element by ID cell grade dot value, we were grabbing the property of an object. So the dot means that I'm getting a property from an object, and sometimes you're grabbing the whole object, and sometimes you're grabbing a property of the object. So we've been doing this stuff for a while now. We just didn't know it. All right. Okay, so this is now our template, our class, our setup for making a quiz. We can have more stuff. It can do more things. Like we may come along somewhere and say, I want to split up the choices and I want to shuffle the choices. Those things we might put here in the class. Those are things that we might want to do with this quiz. With an object, with a quiz object, those are things we might want to do. But for now, we just want to say, let's get the data in there. Okay. So our goal I don't want to have 3 arrays. I don't want to have questions and answers and choices. I want to have an array of objects. So I want to get rid of these 3. I want to get rid of 47, 48, 49, and have one thing that has 3 properties. I need a name. Quiz array. Okay. And my goal is to make these 3 go away. So I'm editing what we had, what the last thing we had, but I want to get rid of this parallel array idea and turn it into an array of objects. Okay. So we have populate. we read a file. That doesn't change. Oops. Let me save. Let me close that. Okay. What are we changing? Here's what we're changing. Here's where we established 3 arrays, and we want to turn that into an object that has 3 properties. Where'd that come from? All right, so I forgot what the hell we called it. Quiz array. So we say that I'm going to make a new, what did we call it? Quiz. We're going to use that template, the class template. We're going to use it to make an object. We use the keyword new that says use that constructor thing. And it was, the order matters. It was, we wanted the question and then the answer and then the choices. We want pieces 0, pieces 1, pieces 2. So this is supposed to make a set of objects. I don't have questions and answers and choices anymore, so I got to comment that out. Keep doing that. Let's see what happens if we console log quiz array. Let's see what happens. All right. Shuffling was okay because we did that on a bunch of text. And what do we have here? We don't have question anymore. So we have this function next. We have to clean that up a little bit. Document get an element by ID, div quest inner HTML equals question counter. What's that going to become? Document get element by ID, div quest inner HTML equals questions counter becomes, what was the name of our array? Quiz array. Quiz array, square bracket counter. Quiz array is an array. And then I want the question. That question. That is the question part of my quiz array. I have a quiz array element. Quiz array is an array. I have an element of the quiz array. The element of the quiz array is an object, and I want its question property. That was a lot. Let's say that. It's okay. So quiz array is an array. That makes sense. it is an array of now objects. And then we can say of the quiz class if we want. An element of the array is an object of the quiz class. And we want the question property. We want, instead of having these three arrays, we're going to have one array that has three properties. Just kind of moving things around, but we're becoming more sophisticated. So that's just a big, long ass comment that I just wrote. But if I talk a lot, maybe I should stop and type a little bit. And now we're doing what? Same thing down here in 115. We are splitting choices. Well, I don't have choices anymore. What do I have? I have an object of the quiz array. I have the quiz array. I have an element of the quiz array. And then I have a property of the element of the quiz array. So I'm going to comment this one out. And what's the new one look like? I don't have choices anymore. I have quiz array counter. Quiz array counter. And then it has what? It had a choices property. Again, it's mostly just a rearrangement game. We had questions and we had answers and we had choices as these three arrays, and then we just kept them, they were parallel arrays. So it's like, oh, they seem like they're different, but if we use the same index, these things are related. Now we're making that relationship firmer by saying those things are always together. There's only one array. And then that array, the objects, the elements of that array are an object that has these multiple properties. So instead of these three things that happen to be related, I have one set of things that are definitely related, and we just have to learn to get used to how to get the different aspects of that one thing out. And this is that dot property kind of stuff. What happens here? We're shuffling. Well, we're shuffling up choices split, and that doesn't change. And then we're taking our choices split and we are showing them up in our radio buttons. That doesn't change. And we don't have questions length anymore. We have quiz array is the array. And all we needed here was really an array that had a length, and we still have an array with a length. It's just now quiz array. And now I'm at the bottom of my script. And hopefully we've changed what needed to be changed to turn this over into a class object. All right, let's see if it works. And then probably just re-explain everything because it's complicated. So here is my question, where's the last human city? Here are my choices. And I'm going to, I don't think we wrote any code for grade, but I'm going to grade and then get my next question and grade and get my next question, etc. So we have recovered what we had before, but now we have an array of objects of a class that we called quiz. Let's look at it one more time. So we went up a serious level of abstraction here. We had parallel arrays. We had the question, we had the answer, we had the choices. We said, I don't want to do that anymore. We're growing up. We're moving on to an object-oriented course in the next semester. So we should face an object, face on, and deal with it. So instead of having these three things that are artificially related by using the same index, a parallel arrays, we've decided to fuse them together, to insist that they are different aspects of the same thing, that they're different properties of the same thing. So we made a multiple choice question. We called it quiz. It's not a whole quiz. The array is the entire quiz, but this is a component, a quiz component. But quiz is really not anything about the quiz, but it's the template for the quiz. So a class is just a generic template from which you make things. So we take this class and we said, what does our class have? Our class has questions and answers and choices for those answers. And then we have to make a question. We have to construct a question. Another word is instantiate. We have to create a question from our data. And we said we want to do it all at once. And so we made a constructor that took in the information we want, the questions and the answers and the choices. Could have done our parsing here if we wanted. We could have said what we take in is one thing and then we'll parse it here. We didn't do that, but we could have. Okay. So we're taking in a question and answer and choices. And then all we did here is say that once I make the thing, it's capital Q question is whatever the first thing was, quest. And the answer is the second thing, and choices are the third thing. And we can make more out of a quiz than what we have here, but this is the simplest object. Just associate some data, make it move around together. We got rid of our 3 arrays to make them 1 array. Got rid of 3 arrays, we made it 1 array. Because that array is going to have, each element of the array is going to have the 3 properties. Counter was keeping track of what question we're on. In the quiz, that didn't change. Populate was called by onload, that didn't change. We are reading the file in fetch, that did not change. Remember, we talked about that when we get a resource like a text file, there's also status and other kind of crap. So that's why there are these 2 thens. The first then, we just sort of throw away everything but the actual text. And then in the second one, we do whatever the hell we really wanted to do, parse the data. So I said whatever came in, I called it text, and then we split the text on the return character or the return escape sequence and the new line escape sequence, and got lines of the file. We looped over we shuffled the lines of the file. That didn't change. Here we are splitting up the lines of the file on our second delimiter of a slash. The delimiters change. This time it happens to be a slash. Sometimes I make vertical bars. Sometimes I make semicolons. Don't trust me that, oh, he always uses vertical bar or he always uses slash. I don't always do anything. I'm not that consistent. Don't think you know my mind. I don't know my mind, and I've known me much longer than you've known me. All right. So now here, 81 is this new way. Instead of making 3 separate things, I am making one thing with three properties. This was making three things that were parallel. Here I'm making one thing with three properties. The word new, I should make that a comment. The word new implies use the constructor. So up above, we had something called a constructor. And when you see the word new, that means use the constructor. Implies, not immoles, implies, okay. I never did look at my console log. Let me look at my console log. Where's my console? Here's my array of 14 things. And then here is my 0th thing, which has three properties. So instead of having three arrays, I have one array, and each element of the array has three properties. We're just reorganizing. I can make the choices. I can work on the choices and make them an array and have an array property of my object, but we didn't do that. But we could have. Okay. So, and after that, after I've made my array of objects of the class quiz, then anytime I previously referred to one of my arrays, I instead refer to the corresponding property of my single array. So here I am in, where the hell is, here's my next. I don't refer to questions counter. One of my arrays, I go to my big array and go to the question property of it. I don't go to the choices array, I go to the choices property of my array of objects. It's all the same, it's reorganized, and it makes all the data move around together. Now you know what an object is. All the stuff about a select in JavaScript, all the stuff about a select moves together. You can say, oh, what font am I, what style do I have for these radio buttons? What's the value of the radio button? What is the name of the radio button? You can access the individual properties of the radio button, or you can grab the whole radio button. It's an object, the radio button is an object, and then there are the properties of the radio button. What's its value? What's its name? So on. And we got no farther on the matrix quiz, but we are learning our sort of concept, our abstraction is much higher. This is this idea of object versus these little variables or arrays that we're chasing around. Instead of putting all the stuff together, that's like a level higher in abstraction. On one hand, we didn't do anything, and on the other hand, we just did a lot. Okay, I'm out of time.